The freighter Iron Wake wasn't much to look at. An aging class for hauler with patched-up hull plating, outdated ion thrusters, and a habit of groaning like an old man every time it entered Otmo. But for Callum Haynes, it was home. The last honest-to-goodness human mechanic in this sector of the galaxy. Callum had seen better days, but not by much. His credit balance was perpetually near zero, and most of his clientele only paid in barter. Some people had droids for ship repairs. Callum had himself and an increasingly stubborn ship AI named Greaves. It wasn't much, but it was his. Right now, it was also occupied by a dragon. Callum squinted at the massive, scaly intruder lounging on the cargo bay floor. Earlax, the unyielding, self-proclaimed last of the Varkathian wormkin, was curled up like a smug house cat, tail flicking lazily, golden eyes glowing with amusement. "You're still here," Callum said flatly, arms crossed. "I have decided I like it here," rumbled Earlax, voice a deep, gravelly bass. "Your ship smells of warm plasma, lubricants, and the sweat of toil. It reminds me of home." Callum pinched the bridge of his nose. "Earlax, we had a deal. You needed a ride to Port Gallon, and I, against my better judgment, let you hitch along. Port Gallon was 3 jumps ago." Earlax stretched, clawed hands flexing. "Yes, and yet, I find myself quite comfortable." Callum groaned. "What is it you want? A bigger bunk? Custom temperature settings? Because I'm already low on." "Do you know what I despise, little human?" Earlax interrupted, standing to his full, intimidating height. Nearly 9 feet of obsidian scales, sharp horns, and wings that barely fit within the cargo hold. "I despise being told where I should or should not be." Callum exhaled, massaging his temples. He didn't have time for this. Iron Wake had a job to do, a high-risk, high-reward mission to deliver an experimental FTL core to a remote research station past uncharted space. He had no time for a free-loading ancient dragon with an attitude problem. "I don't have room for passengers," Callum tried again. "This isn't some interstellar cruise liner." Earlax snorted, smoke curling from his nostrils. "You have room for me, human. I take up little space. You're a 9-foot-tall, fire-breathing WYRM. A dragon, actually. Same difference." Earlax let out a deep chuckle, the sound vibrating through the hull plating. "No, not quite." Callum ran a hand through his messy brown hair, muttering curses under his breath. He wasn't about to let some stubborn lizard derail his plans. But throwing him out wasn't exactly an option. He wasn't suicidal. "I've got an important mission," Callum tried, his voice firm. "You sticking around complicates things." Earlax tilted his head. "A mission?" His slitted pupils narrowed. "Tell me more." "No." "Then I will stay." "Stars, damn it." Callum kicked a nearby crate, immediately regretting it. "Look, Greaves, help me out here." The ship's AI chimed in, its smooth synthetic voice crackling over the cargo bay speakers. "Captain, I detect that the probability of Earlax voluntarily leaving the vessel is currently 0.0043%. Callum glared at the nearest speaker. "You didn't need to be that specific. You requested my assistance." Earlax grinned, all teeth. "Your ship is wise." Callum exhaled through his nose, forcing himself to calm down. "Fine." The damn dragon could stay for now. But the moment he got to a major hub, he was selling Earlax's oversized hide to the highest bidder. He turned to stomp away, but Earlax rumbled again. "You said important mission," he mused. "Important to who?" Callum paused. "Why does it matter?" "Because, human, if it is important to you, I shall not interfere. If it is important to others," he bared his fangs, "then I shall determine whether they deserve its completion." A chill crawled up Callum's spine. "It's a delivery job. That's it." Earlax's expression didn't change, but something in his golden eyes glowed brighter. "We shall see." Callum clenched his jaw. He didn't like the way Earlax said that, and something told him this mission was about to get a hell of a lot more complicated. Callum had every intention of making Earlax someone else's problem. At least, that was the plan before they ran into a warship. The Iron Wake was mid-jump to its next checkpoint when Greaves' voice crackled through the ship's internal speakers. "Captain, I regret to inform you that we have been intercepted." "Callum, hunched over the control panel, stiffened. Intercepted? We're in FTL. Affirmative. The gravity well generator deployed at our destination has forced an emergency exit. We are now within range of an unidentified battleship. The ship lurched, engines straining as they were forcibly yanked back into real space. Callum swore, gripping the edges of his console as iron wake rattled like a tin can. The view outside the viewport blurred violently before snapping into clarity, and right in front of them, dominating the starfield, was something massive. A Dothraki warship. The sleek, obsidian black behemoth hovered in their path, a predatory silhouette lined with pulsing violet lights. It was easily 50 times the size of Callum's Iron Wake, and it bristled with disruptor turrets, shield arrays, and an absolute disregard for personal space. Dothrakis, Callum hissed. Why the hell are they in this sector? The Dothraki weren't pirates. They were worse. A nomadic war clan that took what they wanted, when they wanted. And right now, they wanted him. A calm request buzzed through the console. Callum hesitated, then tapped the accept button. A holographic projection flickered to life in front of him. The figure was tall, draped in flowing armor that gleamed under the hollow light. His amethyst eyes gleamed with amusement, and the wicked curve of his horns framed a sharp, angular face. Human, the alien purred. This is High Commander Varesh Luthai of the War Clan Kavar. You will surrender your ship immediately. Callum's heart slammed against his ribs. He kept his expression neutral. Not happening. Varesh chuckled a soft, grating sound. I thought you might say that. You have something of interest to me. Callum's stomach twisted. The FTL core. The cargo in his hold wasn't just some standard-issue drive component. It was a prototype singularity drive, experimental human technology capable of exceeding even the best slipstream engines in the galaxy. The kind of thing the Dothraki would kill for. I don't know what you're talking about. Callum lied. Varesh's grin widened. Then perhaps we should discuss the prisoners I have aboard. Some of your kind. Callum's blood ran cold. Bullshit. Varesh flicked a hand. Another projection materialized, showing a cell lined with force fields, and inside, 3 humans, bound in chains, bruised and bloody. One of them looked straight at the camera. Callum's breath hitched. Elara. She looked rough, disheveled brown hair, a nasty cut above one eye, but still very much alive. Callum hadn't seen her in years. His former co-pilot. Varesh hummed. Now you understand. If you do not comply, I will send you their remains piece by piece. Callum's grip on the console tightened. His mind raced. He couldn't let them take the Iron Wake. Couldn't let them have the FTL core. But Elara, he couldn't abandon her. His thoughts were interrupted by a low growl behind him. Do you know what I despise even more than being told where I should be? Human? Callum turned just as Earlax's massive form loomed in the cockpit doorway, golden eyes burning like molten suns. Threats? Before Callum could say a word, Earlax moved. The dragon shoved him aside, planting both clawed hands on the console. A deep, resonant vibration filled the ship. Callum felt it in his bones, in the very metal of the Iron Wake itself. And then, with a sound like reality itself tearing apart, Earlax roared. A brilliant pulse of energy exploded outward, a shockwave of pure draconic will radiating through the void. The hologram of Varesh flickered, his expression twisting in surprise, then in pain. The Dothraki warship trembled. Alarms blared through the Iron Wake's cockpit as Varesh's projection distorted, static crackling violently through the feed. His horned silhouette blurred, and for a moment, Callum swore he saw something primal flash across the alien's face, not anger. Fear. The comm link cut off abruptly. Callum whipped around. What the hell did you just do? Earlax exhaled, steam curling from his nostrils. Reminded them of their place. Callum's console blinked wildly, with warning signs. Greaves' voice chimed in, almost amused. Captain, the Dothraki warship is retreating. Their weapons are disengaging. Callum blinked. Wait, what? Earlax rumbled. They will think twice before challenging a Varkathian WYRM. Callum stared at him, then at the retreating warship, then back at him. and realized something. This grumpy, freeloading ancient dragon wasn't just some oversized lizard. He was something far more dangerous, and Callum had no idea what he'd just gotten himself into. The Dothraki never retreated. That fact alone kept Callum on edge long after the warship vanished from sensors. He'd expected a fight, expected to be dodging plasma barrages, not watching a battleship tuck tail and run like a spooked dog. And all because of Earlax. The old dragon sat sprawled across the Ironwake's cargo hold, completely unbothered. His molten gold eyes were half-lidded in what Callum could only describe as an expression of deep, personal satisfaction. Callum, on the other hand, was far from satisfied. "What did you do to them?" he demanded, arms crossed. Earlax let out a low, rumbling exhale, smoke curling from his nostrils. "Nothing permanent. Merely reminded them of an old truth." Callum scowled. "You're going to have to elaborate." Earlax cracked an eye open. "There was a time when the Dothraki feared my kind. Before your species even left its homeworld, we were already at war with them. My kin crushed them beneath our wings, tore their fleets apart with our breath. They called us the Doom of the Void." Callum hesitated. Doom of the Void. He'd heard the stories. Hell, every species had. The Dothraki used to rule entire sectors until something ripped through their empire like a plague. The legends claimed monsters from the dark hunted them into submission. Some said it was an ancient AI, others a cursed weapon. Nobody ever said it was dragons. "You expect me to believe you just mind-screamed them into running?" Earlax's deep chuckle reverberated through the cargo hold. "Their bones remember, even if their history does not." Callum ran a hand through his hair, exhaling sharply. "Great. So now we've pissed off an entire war clan." Earlax rumbled. They would not dare return. Not without a far greater force. Callum wasn't so sure. The Dothraki weren't just going to let their prize slip away. And he still had a mission to complete, a classified mission that was supposed to stay quiet. That was before he learned he was harboring a walking extinction event in his cargo hold. He pinched the bridge of his nose. "Right? Okay. We need a new plan." Greaves' voice interrupted. "Captain, we have an incoming transmission. It's from Alara." Callum's breath hitched. "Put it through." The console blinked, and the hollow display shimmered to life. But instead of the confident, sarcastic woman he remembered, Alara looked like hell. Her face was gaunt, a deep bruise blooming along her jawline. The flickering light of a prison cell bathed her features in shadows. But her eyes, they were still sharp, still alive. "Callum," she rasped. "That was one hell of a stunt you pulled." Callum clenched his fists. "Are you all right? What's your status?" Alara gave a weak smile. "Oh, chained up, bruised, probably about to be executed." Same old, same old." Callum's jaw tightened. "Where are you?" Her expression darkened. "A Dothraki outpost. Deep space, uncharted. They don't want me for ransom, Callum. They want me for what I know." His stomach nodded. Alara wasn't just a former pilot. She had been part of Project Singularity. One of the few who knew the full extent of what the experimental FTL core in his cargo hold could do. "Listen to me," she said, voice urgent. "You can't let them take the core. They don't just want its power. They want to weaponize it." Callum's throat went dry. If the Dothraki got their hands on a Singularity drive, they wouldn't just be pirates anymore. They'd be gods. Alara's eyes flickered to something off-screen. She paled. "Shit, they're coming." The feed cut out. Callum's pulse spiked. "Greaves! Trace the transmission." "Already on it, Captain." A pause. Then, coordinates acquired. "However, there is a complication." Callum's stomach sank. "What kind of complication?" Greaves hesitated. "The outpost is within a decaying orbit around a dead star. Its gravitational collapse is imminent." Callum cursed violently. Of course it wasn't going to be easy. He turned to Earlax. "You're supposed to be some all-powerful cosmic terror, right? Got any tricks for surviving a dying sun?" The dragon's golden eyes gleamed. "Perhaps, but I require something in return." Callum narrowed his eyes. "What?" Earlax leaned forward, the weight of his presence suddenly suffocating. "When this mission is over, human, you will not abandon me." Callum's breath caught. That was it. The real reason Earlax wouldn't leave. He wasn't just hitching a ride. He didn't want to be alone. For the first time, Callum saw something other than arrogance in the dragon's gaze. Something deeper. Something almost desperate. The silence stretched. Finally, Callum exhaled. Fine, but you'd better make damn sure we survive this. Earlax's lips curled into something that might have been a smile. Then let us make haste, human. The void does not wait for mercy. And with that, they set a course toward the Dead Star, toward Alara, toward a fight they might not walk away from. The Iron Wake punched through the final layer of subspace, dropping into real space with a gut-wrenching lurch. Callum's hands flew over the controls, stabilizing their descent as the ship's hull groaned under immense gravitational forces. The Dead Star loomed ahead, a monstrous, lightless void, its gravity while spinning the wreckage of countless ships in a slow, agonizing spiral toward oblivion. And at the edge of that event horizon, nestled in the shattered remains of an ancient station, was the Vothraki outpost. Greaves, status report. Callum barked. Structural integrity of the station is critical, Captain, the AI replied. The gravitational collapse is accelerating. Estimated time until total destruction, 47 minutes. Callum's gut twisted. And the Vothraki? Multiple ships detected in defensive formation. They have spotted us. Before Callum could react, the comms crackled to life, and a deep, guttural voice filled the cockpit. Human, you have made a mistake coming here. Callum recognized that voice. Kovarek, the Vothraki warlord. A scarred, battle-hardened monster with more confirmed kills than anyone in the sector. Surrender the singularity drive, and I may let you live. Resist, and you will be torn apart like the rest. Callum's fingers curled into fists. There was no negotiating with someone like Kovarek. The moment they handed over the drive, he'd have no reason to let them walk away. Earlax rumbled from behind him, his massive form shifting in the cargo hold. Their numbers mean nothing. I will remind them why they should fear the dark. Callum wasn't so sure. There were at least 7 warships stationed near the outpost, far too many to fight head-on. He needed a different strategy. Alara's still inside, Callum said, activating the comms. Greaves, do we have a direct path? Affirmative, but you will need to dock manually. The station's auto systems are failing. Callum's jaw set. Then let's get this done. He gunned the Iron Wake's thrusters, diving toward the outpost at full speed. The Vothraki ships reacted immediately, their weapons lighting up the void as plasma bolts streaked toward them. Impact warnings screamed across the dashboard. Shields at 32%, Greaves reported. We cannot sustain direct fire. Callum's pulse pounded. Divert all power to forward thrusters. Brace for turbulence. The Iron Wake roared as it punched through the chaos, barely skimming past an incoming missile. Callum swung the ship into a sharp drift, twisting into the docking lane at the last possible second. The clamps engaged. The hatch hissed open. Callum grabbed his sidearm and sprinted into the collapsing station. Inside, the Vothraki were waiting. The moment Callum stepped into the dim, flickering corridors, blaster fire erupted from both sides. He barely had time to duck behind cover before the metal walls melted under the heat. Damn it, he cursed, returning fire. The air was thick with smoke and static, the entire station groaning as its supports buckled under the stress. Somewhere ahead, trapped, was Alara. A deafening roar suddenly shook the entire corridor. Then, fire. Earlax burst through the docking entrance, his massive form barely squeezing through the station's narrow halls. He inhaled deep, and then a torrent of fire swept through the Vothraki ranks, engulfing them in white-hot destruction. Callum shielded his eyes from the blazing inferno. When he looked up again, the once crowded hallway was now scorched black and empty. Earlax exhaled smoke, his molten gaze flickering toward Callum. Move! Quickly! Callum ran. They tore through the station, dodging falling debris and blasting through the last line of resistance. Then, finally, Alara's cell. Callum blasted the lock. The door slammed open, and Alara stumbled forward, looking like hell. She caught sight of Callum, Her eyes widened in shock. What the hell? No time, Callum snapped. Move! But the second she stepped out, a shadow loomed in the corridor. And there he stood, Kovarek. The Dothraki warlord was massive, even by his species' standards. His black armor gleamed, and his eyes, cold, reptilian slits, locked on a Callum with pure contempt. You dare defy me, human? Callum raised his weapon, but Kovarek was faster. In a blur of motion, the warlord lunged, striking with the force of a wrecking ball. Callum barely managed to twist away, but the impact sent him crashing into the wall, ribs screaming in protest. Pathetic, Kovarek sneered, stepping closer. You think you are different from the rest? That you can stand against us? Earlax growled, stepping forward. I have already reminded your kind once today. Must I do so again? Kovarek's lips curled back. Ah, the last of the void dragons, he mused. I had thought your kind extinct. Perhaps I should correct that oversight. Earlax snarled. Callum saw the moment Kovarek moved. A blur of claws and fury, faster than a damn missile. But Earlax was faster. The dragon met the warlord head-on, their collision shaking the entire station. Callum grabbed Alara and pulled her toward the docking bay. We need to go now. Alara glanced back. And the dragon? Callum hesitated. Earlax and Kovarek were locked in brutal combat, the Dothraki warlord striking with savage precision. But Earlax was relentless, his flames searing through armor like paper. Go! Earlax roared. Callum clenched his teeth. There was no time. With a curse, he dragged Alara toward the ship. By the time they reached the Iron Wake, the station was collapsing. Captain, Greaves warned, if we do not leave immediately, we will be caught in the gravitational collapse. Callum's grip tightened on the controls. Wait, Alara shot him a look. Callum, he ignored her. His hands hovered over the thrusters, his heartbeat hammering in his ears. Then at the last second, a massive shadow burst from the crumbling wreckage. Earlax soared through the collapsing debris, his wings snapping open as he launched toward the Iron Wake. Callum punched the throttle. The Iron Wake roared forward, tearing through the debris field just as the Dead Star began its final collapse. The station imploded behind them, the warships caught in the destruction, their hulls ripped apart by the gravitational forces. Callum barely had time to breathe before Greaves spoke. Singularity breach detected. We must accelerate to FTL. Immediately, Callum didn't hesitate. The Iron Wake lurched forward, and in a flash of blinding light, they disappeared into the void. They had survived, but the war wasn't over yet. The Iron Wake shot out of the collapsing gravity well, its hull groaning under the force of the escape. The instant real space stabilized, the alarms finally ceased their screaming. Callum sagged back into his seat, lungs burning, his fingers still locked around the flight controls. They were alive. The ship's interior was a mess. Half the panels flickered erratically, debris was strewn across the floor, and the air reeked of scorched metal and ozone. Earlax lay slumped against the bulkhead, his massive chest rising and falling heavily. The fight had drained him, his usually imposing form marred by deep claw wounds. Alara sat next to him, running a diagnostic scanner over his injuries. Her face was pale, smeared with grime and sweat, but her hands were steady. Callum swallowed hard, forcing himself to focus. Greaves. Damage report. The AI's voice crackled over the intercom. Structural damage. Severe but non-critical. Engine efficiency at 64%. Shields offline. Weapon systems compromised. Callum sighed. That could have gone worse. Alara looked up. We need to treat Earlax's wounds before they get worse. The dragon's glowing amber eyes flickered open. I will endure, he rumbled. Alara shot him a glare. You'll bleed out if you keep acting like an idiot. Earlax huffed, but didn't argue. Callum smirked slightly before turning back to the controls. Greaves, status on the Dothraki fleet? A pause. All 7 warships were caught in the gravitational collapse. Callum exhaled slowly. That meant Kovarek was dead. The warlord had been the backbone of Dothraki operations in this sector. With him gone, their forces would be in disarray. The Singularity Drive was still secured in the cargo hold. And, most importantly, they had survived. For the first time since this whole mess started, Callum let himself feel a sliver of relief. Hours passed as they patched up wounds, repaired systems, and took their first real breaths. Alara slumped against the wall, exhausted but alive. "You really went through all that trouble just to get me?" she asked, arching an eyebrow. Callum scoffed. "I wasn't going to leave you in the hands of those bastards." Alara studied him for a moment, then smirked. "Guess you're not as reckless as I thought." Callum smirked back. "That's debatable." Earlax, resting nearby, let out a low rumble. "We have achieved victory. But the war is not yet over." Callum's expression hardened. The Vothraki wouldn't forget this. Sure, they had taken out Kovarek's fleet, but there were always more warlords, more soldiers, more battles waiting on the horizon. And if the Vothraki ever learned what the Singularity Drive was truly capable of, they wouldn't just be chasing Callum. They'd be hunting him. Alara must have sensed his thoughts because her smirk faded. "What now?" Callum exhaled. "Now we figure out our next move." The Iron Wake drifted through the void, its systems humming faintly in the silence. Earlax shifted, fixing Callum with a piercing gaze. "The drive? What do you intend to do with it?" Callum hesitated. The Singularity Drive was too dangerous to fall into the wrong hands. The Vothraki wanted to use it as a weapon. The Galactic Council would likely try to bury it, pretending it never existed. And Callum? He wasn't sure yet. But one thing was clear. He couldn't let it fall into anyone else's control. "First," he said slowly, "we find somewhere safe. We need to disappear." Alara snorted. "Disappear? You really think that's an option after what we just did?" Callum met her gaze. "Then we make them regret coming after us." Earlax's molten eyes gleamed. "You are beginning to think like a warrior." Callum chuckled. "Guess you're rubbing off on me?" Alara sighed, shaking her head. "We're going to get ourselves killed." Callum smirked. "Probably." She rolled her eyes, but she was smiling. And for the first time in a long time, Callum felt something close to hope. Because the war wasn't over. Not yet. But they weren't running anymore. This time they were going to fight. The Iron Wake drifted through deep space, far beyond the wreckage of the battlefield. The scars of war still lined its hull, but the ship held firm, just like its crew. Callum sat in the cockpit, staring out at the endless void. They had won. Kovarek was dead. His fleet, obliterated. The Vothraki warlord who had hunted them across the sector was nothing more than dust and echoes. But Callum knew better than to believe the fight was truly over. The Vothraki Empire was a hydra, cut off one head, and two more would grow in its place. They would come looking. For him. For the Singularity Drive. And they wouldn't stop until they had it. Callum clenched his jaw. They had bought themselves time, nothing more. But time was enough. For now. In the ship's makeshift med bay, Alara finished wrapping the last of Earlax's wounds. The massive dragon lay resting on the floor, his golden eyes half-lidded. "You should be healing faster than this," Alara muttered, adjusting the bandages. Earlax huffed, his breath sending a gust of hot air through the room. "I am old, human. Even dragons feel the weight of time." Alara rolled her eyes. Yeah, tough guy act. Just don't keel over on us." The dragon let out a low, rumbling chuckle, then shifted his gaze toward Callum, who had just stepped inside. Callum crossed his arms. "You've got a choice to make." Earlax blinked slowly. "I've already made my choice." Callum raised an eyebrow. "Oh." Earlax sighed, shifting his weight. "I will remain with you." Alara's eyes widened. "Wait, really? You're staying?" The dragon's gaze flickered. "The battle is not yet over." His voice was gravelly, but steady. "And I have found something worth fighting for?" Callum smirked. "Didn't think you'd get attached." Earlax let out a low grumble. "Perhaps I am growing sentimental in my old age." Alara nudged Callum. "Told you he liked us?" Callum just shook his head, smiling. Earlax staying changed everything. With a dragon of his caliber and experience, they had a real chance of standing against the Vothraki. And maybe, just maybe, they could win. Just as that thought settled in Callum's mind, the ship's console lit up. An incoming transmission. Alara frowned. We weren't expecting a call, were we? Callum moved to the controls. No. He tapped a few buttons, and the holographic display flickered to life. A figure appeared, a tall, armored being with cold, violet eyes. Alara sucked in a breath. Earlax's golden gaze darkened. Callum felt his stomach tighten. He recognized that armor. This wasn't just another Vothraki warlord. This was High Commander Vasrek, one of the Vothraki Empire's supreme military leaders. And, judging by the icy amusement in Vasrek's expression, he already knew exactly what Callum had done. Callum Holt, the warlord drawled, his voice like sharpened steel. You've been making quite a mess of things. Callum kept his expression blank. Wasn't my intention. Vasrek tilted his head. No. Then why did you steal an artifact of immense power? Why did you slaughter one of my finest commanders? Callum crossed his arms. Kovarek tried to kill me first. The warlord let out a low chuckle. Ah, but that is the nature of war, isn't it? His amusement faded, replaced by a cold, predatory stare. You have something that does not belong to you. Alara muttered under her breath. Here we go. Callum stayed silent. Vasrek continued, his voice smooth. Return the singularity drive, and I will let you live. Callum narrowed his eyes. That's funny. Kovarek made the same offer before he died. Vasrek's expression didn't change, but Callum swore he saw the slightest flicker of annoyance. Make no mistake, human, Vasrek said softly. You will not outrun me. You will not outfight me. This game you play is meaningless. Callum smirked. Then why are you bothering with offers? A pause. Then, a slow, cold smile spread across Vasrek's face. Because I want to see if you are as foolish as Kovarek. And with that, the transmission cut out. Silence settled over the cockpit. Alara exhaled sharply. Well, that's not terrifying at all. Callum leaned back in his chair, exhaling slowly. Vasrek wasn't just another warlord. He was smarter, more ruthless, more powerful. And now, he was coming for them. Earlax's clawed hands flexed. Vasrek is no ordinary enemy. No kidding, Callum muttered. Alara frowned. So, what do we do? Callum looked out at the stars. The Vothraki Empire was vast. They had ships, weapons, armies. They had an unstoppable war machine at their backs. But Callum had something they didn't. A dragon. A crew that wouldn't back down. And, most importantly, a reason to fight. He turned back to Alara and Earlax, his jaw set. We make the first move. Alara blinked. Wait, what? Callum smirked. They expect us to run? His eyes burned with determination. So let's hit them before they hit us. Alara stared at him for a moment. Then slowly, a grin spread across her face. Earlax let out a low, approving growl. And with that, Callum set a course. Not away, not to hide, but to fight. As the Iron Wake disappeared into the black, the battle was far from over. But for the first time, Callum wasn't just surviving. He was taking the war to them, and the Vothraki Empire had no idea what was coming.